Welcome back. In this module, we'll look at the big picture of version control. We've seen that version control is basically about creating snapshots of files, but that simple idea has far-reaching consequences, and we're going to talk about them. Public service announcement. We're going to talk about version control in general, not specifically Git. So if you are already familiar with any version control system, you might decide to skip to the next module if you wish. Maybe just watch the clip called Managing Multiple Versions of a Project, because I will mention a few Git-specific commands in there, and feel free to skip the rest if you are in a hurry. Are you still here? Good. So let's see what makes version control so essential to software developers. The most obvious benefit of version control is that it gives you a detailed history of your project. As an example, I have a long-running open source project here, and here is its history. See, we have all the changes, their messages, the authors and dates, everything that happened. This can be useful for any kind of project, not just software projects. I used version control to produce this training, for example. In software projects, however, this history is even more important because source code is so complicated and hard to deal with. So a history like this can help you debug your code, for example, or to revert broken changes. It's like having an infinite undo-redo function. In fact, sometimes I wonder, how did we ever live without version control? Well, most people did something like this. This is a very old project of mine, a computer game. Back then, I didn't use version control, so I periodically copy-pasted the project folder to this backup directory. See, some of these directories are named with a date or with a version of sorts. And another thing I did was sometimes I didn't delete code, even useless code, because I was afraid I would need it again later. So I just commented it out, like I did here. And as you can imagine, the result was a big mess. I was never 100% sure which of these folders contained what. My code was littered with commented out functions, and ironically, sometimes I still lost important information because I got confused by all these copies. It wasn't a great development experience. These days, I put all my projects on version control. For example, I told you that I put the material for this training on Git. Here it is. If I want to recover an old slide or a file that I deleted, I can just go back in time, and there it is. If I'm wondering where a change happened, I can ask a Git. It's just so convenient. Just to be clear, version control is not a backup, at least not by itself. For example, yes, I put this training in a Git repository, but that repo is still on my laptop. So if my disk fails, then I lose both the project and the repo. So I have a separate backup strategy to keep this project safe. Version control can be useful to recover from a disaster in some cases, but in general, it's not like you put a project on Git and you stop worrying about backups. It depends on where that Git repository is exactly. I just had to make myself clear on that. So, tracking your project's history, that's the first and most obvious reason to use version control. But there are more.